They walk in like they own the room, loud, charming, convinced every eye is theirs. You know the type. They treat silence like weakness. They interrupt to dominate. They swell their importance with every sentence. On the surface, they look untouchable. Underneath, a fragile ego propped up by attention. You don't have to smash them with force. Machiavelli didn't. He dismantled people with surgical patience, small, precise moves that left the other person bewildered, exposed, unsure. The trick isn't to humiliate them outright. It's to make them doubt themselves. That doubt does most of the work. Rule 1 is almost counterintuitive. Don't attack the ego head-on. Inflame it. Praise it. Nod like they're a king. If you confront someone who's already defensive, they tighten up. But if you stroke their vanity, they relax. They believe you're on their side. That's when they let their guard down. That's when they get sloppy. Let them be the smartest person in the room. Let them talk. Let them parade their charm and their wins. While they're busy performing, you're watching. You're collecting information. What do they brag about? What do they avoid saying? How do they react when someone questions them lightly? A person who basks in flattery thinks they've won, and winners stop watching for traps. Once they're relaxed, it's time for the second move. Mirror and exaggerate. Don't just tell them they're brilliant. Push it slightly past believable. If they love being seen as clever, tell them, honestly, you're the sharpest mind I've met. Probably too smart for most people in this city. If they pride themselves on looks, say something like, you could walk onto any film set and take the lead. The compliment is so inflated it becomes a mirror that distorts their vanity. What happens then is subtle and powerful. The exaggeration exposes the vanity for what it is. Because their praise has become absurd, other people notice. The person who was once basking starts to hear the echo of the praise and wonder. Is this genuine? Am I being played? That first seed of paranoia is the admiration real or performance? Is your second cut? Next, don't attack. Ask, probe, plant doubts with questions that sound friendly but have teeth. That's an interesting take. Where did you hear that? Do you think that play would still work today? Bold, I respect it. You're not contradicting them. You're making them justify themselves. Viewed in public, the effect multiplies. They feel evaluated, not admired. Confident people don't explain themselves. If someone begins to defend or elaborate unnecessarily, they've slipped into insecurity. That hesitation, the need to prove, lets you see the cracks. When you sprinkle these little questions throughout the conversation, the person starts to over-explain, to over-justify. That's another victory. You haven't attacked their value. You've made their value look uncertain. Now, the quiet weapon. Silence. When they expect praise, give them nothing. When they say something they're proud of, don't clap. Look, blink once, give a small nod, and move on. Or say something neutral, and almost dismissive, interesting, and change the subject. For someone addicted to validation, silence is brutal. It's the withdrawal of a drug. They expected applause. They got quiet. And silence fills the space louder than any insult. It forces them to ask themselves, did I actually impress anyone? That tiny question gnaws at them because their identity is wrapped up in external approval. You've just introduced a gap between their performance and the world's response. Don't confront them directly by trying to outshout or out-argue. Machiavelli avoided head-to-head fights because those put the focus on you and trigger defenses. Instead, outshine without seeming to compete. If they brag about income, tell a calm anecdote about handling far more casually. If they boast about a skill, reference an accomplishment that makes theirs pale, not with showy arrogance, but with a detached tone, as if their feat is only a small detail of your life. This is a powerful shift. They expected a contest. They got a demonstration of effortless superiority. When excellence is presented as casual fact, it's more cutting than direct challenge. Their achievement, once impressive, now seems ordinary. And people compare. Others in the room will start to reframe what they thought impressive. The bloated ego begins to shrink in public without a single blow thrown. A further move is to gently press on the very insecurities they hide. Most loud egos are compensations for something. If someone brags about money, ask in a soft voice, "Does it ever scare you? What happens if it's all gone?" If they're obsessed with being liked, ask, "Do you ever wonder whether people only act that way to avoid conflict?" These aren't attacks. They're casual curiosities that force the person to look inward. Those questions lodge like seeds. They're psychological weight. When asked calmly and without malice, they're almost impossible to answer in a way that preserves the polished image. And every pause, every microsecond of uncertainty is visible. The person you wanted to expose is now revealing the very doubts they worked so hard to hide. Finally, for this segment, patience. If you've inflated, mirrored, questioned, and stayed quiet when it mattered, you don't have to push anymore. Let them run their script. People with huge egos overreach. They'll overshare, contradict themselves, or pick the wrong fight. If they do, don't leap in. Stay composed. Let them falter on their own. In public, your calm looks like competence. Their unraveling looks like weakness. Remember, the goal isn't public humiliation. It's the collapse of the illusion. You want them to doubt themselves, to feel the insecurity they always disguised. When that doubt sets in, their power becomes brittle. And when they stumble, people won't remember who shouted louder. They'll remember who stayed cool. You win by being still, precise, and patient. Now we move into the darker, more surgical side of the playbook. The stuff that looks like compliments but acts like sabotage. This is where you praise someone for the very traits they try to bury. It sounds backwards, but it's devastatingly effective. Imagine someone who masks insecurity about intelligence by acting like a know-it-all. Instead of calling them out, tell them, "What I admire about you is how you keep things simple. You don't overthink." If they pride themselves on toughness, say, "You're so calm and gentle." It's rare to meet someone like that. Those lines do something subtle. They label the person in a way that contradicts their internal story. They can't reject it without admitting the insecurity that made them overcompensate in the first place. You've put a name on what they hide, and once that name is in the room, the script flips. Use the room as a weapon without saying a word. When they speak, look at them briefly, then glance slowly around at others with a neutral eyebrow raise. Not mocking, just curious. That small motion invites other people's attention to shift, and suddenly the spotlight they demanded becomes an interrogation lamp. People start looking, scanning for a flaw. When the group shifts, so does the social pressure. The ego that loves attention now feels pressure to perform perfectly, and pressure makes people crack. When they inevitably say something wrong, don't correct them. Don't argue. Pause. Smile politely. Move the conversation on. That silence says a lot. It communicates that what they just said wasn't worth the trouble. Dismissal stings more than confrontation. It's quiet humiliation. You haven't attacked them. You've rendered them irrelevant. Pride dies slowly that way. Then there's the faint laugh, the tiny, almost involuntary chuckle when they try to impress. Not cruel, not loud, just a small sound of amusement, and then stillness. That laugh is lethal because it signals you see through them. They can't call you out for laughing. "Who laughs at me?" because it would look petty. Instead, they feel exposed. People will notice the smile and the pause, and the performer's confidence wiggles for a second. That tiny breach is all you need. Once you've weakened them with these soft moves, you step into more probing territory. Ask questions that have the appearance of curiosity but the intent of excavation. If someone flaunts wealth, ask about the source, gently. That's impressive. Is that passive income or a high-margin business? If someone brags about leadership, ask, how do you manage people who don't respond to status? If they posture emotionally invincible, ask, what do you do when you feel powerless? You're not asking to be helpful. You're asking for hesitation. Hesitation is a sound everyone in the room hears. Even a well-crafted answer that follows a pause carries that pause with it. It colors how listeners hear the response. A confident answer without a pause sounds like truth. A confident answer after a flicker of doubt sounds like a story being patched up. You don't need to puncture them yourself. Make them puncture themselves. There's an especially brutal move I want you to keep in your pocket. Let them think they've won, then take it away with no explanation. Give them the validation loop respect, admiration, invites, and when they assume they own that source of approval, withdraw. No drama, no closure. You simply stop being the audience they relied on. This silence is different from earlier silence because it's a removal, not a refusal in the moment. It's emotional vanishing. They'll try to reclaim it. They'll perform harder, call more, message more, boast more. Their desperation becomes visible and loud. Others notice the chase, and the more they chase the attention, the more obvious their insecurity becomes. You don't fight. You let the addiction to approval dissolve under the pressure of absence. Once they begin to spiral, deny closure. If they confront you, respond calmly. I moved on. I'm focused on other things now. Or, this isn't about you. Say it warmly, almost kindly. That's important. Aggression would make you petty. Warmth makes you unbothered. It turns their frantic attempts into something pitiable. If they expected victory from you, your mild dismissal is worse than outright scorn because it suggests their victory never mattered. This is not about revenge. It's about rebalancing a dynamic where someone's identity was parasitic on other people's attention. The aim is to change the narrative they've built about themselves. You aren't malicious for making them face their reflection. You're being ruthlessly clear about what you will and will not feed. At the point where their ego is fraying, you can escalate to psychological ownership, a term that sounds dramatic, but it's simply about controlling what others in the room see and remember. Start with selective acknowledgement. When they announce a grand claim meant to impress, ignore it. Don't acknowledge it. Later, when they say something small or revealing, nod and say, now that's interesting. That tiny switch says, without words, that their most prized moments aren't what matters. What they overlooked is. This rewires how people view them. If you consistently choose what to recognize, you change the map of their identity. Others will start to notice what you highlight and what you erase. Social memory is malleable. Repeated slight shifts shape it. You're not lying, you're curating. And when you curate away their grandstanding and toward their slips, their image fractures. Beyond selective praise, deploy strategic indifference. Maintain politeness. Be civil and warm to everyone, but toward them be unconcerned. Don't flinch when they enter the room. Don't rise, don't pivot, don't tilt. Treat their presence like a weather report. Neutral. That demeanor is a knife. People who feed on reactions read micro-expressions. When they get none, they feel a wound deeper than insult. Finally, in this segment, apply symbolic reversal. Mirror their dominant traits, but wear them better. If they've used humor to control, be quieter and more composed in your wit. If they provoke with noise, respond with calm. If they try to dominate with posture, adopt the posture of someone who's always been in that seat. Casual, confident, effortless. The reversal is twofold. You take what they used as armor and show the room a superior model of it. And because you're not competing, it looks natural. It looks like destiny. People watching will sense the shift. The loud one loses the frame not because you attacked, but because you embodied the thing they were pretending to be. You don't need to tell anyone. They'll comment. They seem different lately. He doesn't brag anymore. That's the end game. You let the world do your work for you. Now we enter the deepest stage of Machiavellian ego destruction, where silence, indifference, and subtle manipulation fuse into total psychological control. At this level, you're not just breaking someone's ego, you're rewriting their place in the room. Every gesture, every pause, every choice to speak or not speak becomes a move on the chessboard. You've already disarmed them through flattery, confusion, and silence. Now, you finish the job with quiet superiority. The key is this: never let them know you're playing. When you look unaffected, they're forced to question their own perception. That uncertainty is where their collapse begins. Start with the illusion of superiority without a single word. Don't argue, don't explain, don't justify. When they boast, let them. When they claim dominance, let them think they've earned it. Then respond with calm amusement, like someone watching a child play king for a day. If they brag about power, mention something greater in passing, not to compete, but as if it's normal in your world. If they talk about their business, mention a connection or challenge that's beyond their understanding. Keep it casual. Never frame it as better. Because here's the secret. The ego dies not from losing a fight, but from realizing there was never a fight to begin with. When they act superior and you act unaffected, you erase their victory. You make their performance look small. It's not the force of your power that breaks them. It's your indifference to theirs. Machiavelli's method wasn't to dominate, but to observe and reframe. He made people see that what they thought was grand was actually trivial. He made kings feel like children playing strategy games while he was playing fate. Now use silent comparison. When an egotistical person tries to steal the spotlight, let them shine for a moment. Then redirect the room. Look to someone quieter and say, "That's actually a great point. What do you think?" Or, "I'd love to hear your perspective on that." That small act, giving the stage to someone else, destroys the illusion of dominance. The loud one realizes attention can shift without conflict, and that realization is devastating. You didn't insult them. You didn't ignore them. You simply proved that they're replaceable. Ego-driven people crave control of the narrative. When the narrative moves on without them, it feels like death. Another advanced tactic: the accidental undermining question. You deliver it with kindness, even curiosity, but it slices deep. Examples: you seem really confident. Have you always been that way, or did you learn it to protect yourself? You carry yourself with authority. Was that natural or something you had to build over time? The moment you ask that, the room stills. The subtext lands hard. You're not confident, you're compensating. Everyone hears it without you saying it. The genius of these questions is that they force the target into a paradox. Any answer sounds like proof. Denial sounds defensive. Admission sounds weak. The ego has nowhere to go but inward. And if they do try to defend, don't interrupt. Let them explain. Let them over-explain. because every extra word digs the hole deeper. At this point, bring in one of the most devastating tools in Machiavellian warfare: neutral face, nuclear words. You wait until they've gone too far. Maybe they've mocked you, interrupted, or bragged once too often. You let them finish. Then, calmly, quietly, you speak. You try so hard to look powerful that it's starting to look desperate. Or, you seem like someone who's terrified of being irrelevant. Or the softest, most lethal one. It's not that I think you're bad. I just think your need to be admired makes it impossible to trust you. You say it with no emotion, no aggression, just precision. The silence afterward does the rest. Delivered this way, your words don't sound like insults, they sound like truth. Diagnoses. And when a group hears a diagnosis, they don't side with the patient. They side with the doctor. The ego collapses not because it was attacked, but because it was analyzed. Now, let's go further. One of Machiavelli's favorite tactics was to let the other person talk themselves into exposure. People who crave admiration always overtalk. They reveal too much because they can't stand silence. They rush to fill it with self-importance. So, you give them that stage deliberately. You nod. You smile. You ask follow-up questions that sound fascinated. Really? Tell me more. That's incredible. How did you manage that? You let them expand, exaggerate, and trap themselves in their own story. Eventually, they contradict themselves. They brag beyond credibility. They slip up. When they do, don't react, just raise one eyebrow. A small gesture that says, "I caught that." The people watching will notice. The speaker will feel the air shift. That's when humiliation blooms, not through conflict, but through exposure. They embarrass themselves with their own words, and you never lifted a finger. Once that happens, you move into the final stage of psychological withdrawal. Stop feeding them entirely. No messages, no compliments, no validation, no anger, either just silence. If they try to re-engage, don't respond or respond with detached courtesy. "Oh, sorry, been busy," or "didn't notice." No hostility, only indifference. The colder your calm, the louder their panic becomes. Because you've just taken away their oxygen attention. Ego is a parasite. It needs a host. When you stop being that host, the parasite turns inward and consumes itself. They replay everything you've ever said, searching for clues. They imagine conversations that never happened. They invent reasons for your distance. Their self-importance becomes self-torture. And if they ever confront you, if they ask what went wrong, give them nothing satisfying. Say, "I just outgrew that dynamic," or "It's not important anymore." The key is warmth. You sound compassionate, not cruel. That disarms everyone else while leaving them burning inside, because nothing wounds the ego like losing importance without a fight. Now you begin to own the psychological frame completely. You control when they exist and when they don't. This is selective acknowledgement, one of the most refined mind games in Machiavelli's arsenal. When they say something meant to impress, you ignore it. Not dismissively, just naturally, like you didn't hear it. Then, later, when they mention something small or even awkward, you look intrigued. "Now that's interesting," you say. That says a lot about you. You've just flipped their value system. What they thought made them special no longer earns recognition. What they thought was meaningless now defines them. It's identity sabotage disguised as kindness. People around you will start to follow your lead. Humans mirror social cues. They'll stop rewarding the bragging and start noticing the cracks instead. And when the group stops feeding an ego, that ego collapses faster than any insult could manage. Now layer in the final behavior that turns the knife: strategic indifference. You remain polite, even friendly. You greet them, but with the same warmth you'd give a stranger. You speak when spoken to, but you never initiate. You treat them not as an enemy, but as irrelevant background noise. If they challenge you, you don't defend. You say, "Noted," or "Anyway," and move on. That's it. Every time you move past them, they shrink a little more. Because dominance isn't loud, it's composure. And the quieter you are, the louder their insecurity gets. Eventually, they'll try to mimic you to act calm, detached, superior. But it won't work, because detachment isn't something you can fake. It's something people feel, and everyone in the room will feel that you don't need their validation. That's when you initiate symbolic reversal, the purest form of Machiavellian victory. You take their own traits and wear them better. If they were the loud one, you become the composed one everyone listens to. If they were the charismatic one, you become the magnetic center by saying less and meaning more. Their throne becomes yours not because you fought for it, but because you stopped pretending they deserved it. And when the world starts to notice the shift, do nothing. Don't celebrate, don't gloat, don't even acknowledge the change. Let others say, "They seem different lately," or "Funny how they don't talk as much now." Every comment becomes a small dagger to the ego you've already shattered. You remain calm, steady, unreadable, the living embodiment of control. This is the final principle. You don't destroy an ego with anger. You destroy it with irrelevance. The true Machiavellian never screams, never explains, never brags. He makes others collapse by showing them that their power was an illusion all along. And when the illusion dies, you don't even need to speak. The silence will say it for you. That's how you break anyone's ego, not with rage, not with force, but with quiet precision. Let them perform, let them talk, let them bask. Then step aside and let their pedestal crumble under the weight of its own delusion. You didn't push, you didn't argue. You simply stopped pretending they were untouchable. And that, as Machiavelli knew, is how you win without ever raising your voice. By now, you've set the stage. You flattered, you mirrored, you probed, you withheld. The person you're dealing with has started to wobble. Their confidence that felt ironclad is getting hairline cracks. Part 4 is about consolidating that advantage and making sure the collapse becomes irreversible subtly, inexorably, without you ever appearing to attack. First, tighten your control over perception. People don't remember facts, they remember impressions. At this stage, curate what the room sees. If the person makes a grand pronouncement, act as if it never happened. If they drop an overblown story, treat it like background noise. Then, when they say something small and honest, or something that unintentionally reveals vulnerability, highlight it genuinely. That's an interesting way to think about it. Or, that actually says more about you than you might realize. Those short validations function like lighthouses. They steer other people's attention to the things you want them to notice. Why does this work? Because social validation is contagious. If you, someone who matters in the room, react to a tiny moment instead of the grandstanding, others will mirror you. Suddenly, the narrative shifts. The loud accomplishments that once commanded attention become less important. The small slips, the microaggressions, the moments of inconsistency, those are now the things people remember. You aren't fabricating truths. You're prioritizing which truths get airtime. Next, amplify your indifference in ritualized ways. Don't just ignore, ritualize the indifference. Greet them civilly, then intentionally turn your attention elsewhere in public settings. Ask someone else's opinion after their flourish. Bring up a different topic they can't control. These are tiny rituals with outsized effects. Repetition trains the room to expect that the person's performances will be met with a shrug. Eventually, the person notices the pattern, and patterns terrify egos because they mean predictability and loss of surprise. There's also an art to timing. The most devastating thing you can do is withdraw when they have just achieved a peak. Let them bathe in applause. Let them believe they own the moment, and the next day, act as if nothing happened. No call, no follow-up, no reinforcement. That's the withdrawal that turns an addiction into agony. People who feed on admiration get used to regular doses. Stop supplying it without explanation and watch the addiction kick in. They'll start performing into the void, and desperation looks like weakness. Another tool, social calibration. Make it a habit to praise quietly and specifically for real substance, not spectacle. When people see you reward genuine insight rather than flash, the room begins to value different things. The ego-driven person who relied on thunderous statements and theatrical gestures will find fewer matches for their style. Praise is currency. By changing where you spend it, you change the market. Now, let's talk about alliances. You don't need armies to topple an ego. You need alignment. Quietly build relationships with others who also value substance over noise. Give them space to shine. When the group collectively stops reinforcing grandstanding, it becomes robust. Social norms shift. And when norms shift, the individual feels isolated. They may still attempt their acts, but they'll be met with polite curiosity rather than awe, the social equivalent of being laughed at by an empty theater. When they try to recover, be prepared for a performative comeback. Expect calls, messages, public displays of generosity or courage. These will be overcompensations. Don't rise to them. Respond with calibrated short answers. Thanks for that. Noted. Good to hear. Enough to be polite, not enough to re-enter the validation loop. If their comeback is genuine and steady, maybe they've changed. If it's frantic and loud, it's still performance. Your role is to reward substance, not spectacle. At this juncture, begin to practice what I call measured visibility. Show competence in unobtrusive ways. Share your knowledge or achievements as brief anecdotes rather than billboard announcements. Demonstrate mastery quietly. A well-timed insight in a meeting. A single sentence that reframes a problem. A calm correction that solves confusion without drama. This kind of visibility does two things. It proves competence, and it makes your presence a stable standard in the room. People begin to respect you not because you demand it, but because you earned it. There's a difference between being seen and being worshipped. The egotist needs worship. You offer being seen. That distinction makes a world of difference in how others relate to both of you. Another advanced move is to create micro-failures for them to navigate not traps, but opportunities where they can either show growth or reveal their weakness. For example, in conversation, ask for a concrete example to back up a bold claim. Tell me about a time you handled that personally. If they have the substance, they'll answer and rebuild credibility. If they don't, the gap becomes visible. Either way, you discover what's real, and you do so without being hostile. You're asking for proof, not attacking character. If they begin to pivot and try humility, a genuine apology, a quiet correction, a moment of self-awareness, accept it. Part of being Machiavellian is recognizing when the balance shifts back to fairness. If someone truly grows, reward the change. The objective isn't to crush for sport. It's to recalibrate dynamics so everyone behaves from honesty, not pretense. But beware performative humility. If the move is superficial, treat it like any performance. Polite acknowledgement, but don't re-enter the validation loop. Another key practice is controlling your own inner narrative. Never show that you're invested in the outcome beyond the recalibration itself. If you act vindictive or overly pleased at their fall, you cheapen the operation. The power lies in appearing uninterested, even benevolent. The more neutral and composed you remain, the more others assume you are above the petty drama, and the more persuasive your stance becomes. Finally, think long-term. This isn't about a single moment of humiliation. This is about changing the way people interact with ego in your environment. The goal is to shift incentives so that authenticity is rewarded and grandstanding is ignored. When that culture becomes established, the same person who once dominated will either adapt or fade. And if they adapt, great. If they fade, the space they once occupied is now available for someone more genuine. In summary for this part, curate perception, ritualize indifference, time your withdrawal, reward substance, build alliances, model competence quietly, ask for proof, accept genuine change, and never look petty. The tactics are all quiet, consistent, and strategic. They don't need drama to work. They only need repetition and resolve. When you do this well, the effect compounds. People start to police themselves. Attention becomes scarce currency, and the bravado that once bought it loses value. That's how you dismantle not just a single ego, but an entire culture of spectacle. Now breathe. You've done the heavy work. Part 5 will draw all of this together and show you how to finish cleanly, how to step away with your dignity intact and let the social architecture do the rest. The final phase of breaking someone's ego is not about destruction, it's about quiet control. You've already dismantled the illusion they built around themselves. Now, your job is to make sure it stays that way, that they never rebuild it in your presence. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. True dominance is silent. It doesn't argue. It doesn't boast. It simply exists. The most powerful person in the room is the one who doesn't need to prove it. So first, practice strategic calm. After the storm, say nothing. Don't tell others how you won. Don't seek validation for your cleverness. Remain composed, as if nothing significant happened. Power that needs to announce itself is weak. Power that stays quiet becomes legend. People always trust the one who speaks last, or doesn't speak at all. Your silence will torment the ego far more than confrontation. The person you broke will scramble for footing. They'll act louder, make bolder claims, try harder to look unshaken. Let them. The harder they perform, the smaller they look next to your stillness. You don't need to expose them. They'll expose themselves. Next, master selective acknowledgement. You now decide what exists in your world. If they try to provoke or brag, pretend not to notice. If they speak truth or show real vulnerability, give a single nod, then move on. You're teaching everyone, including them, what deserves attention. Over time, your silence becomes the compass for the entire room. People unconsciously look to you to know what matters. And when the ego you broke notices that, it's too late. You've already taken control of the narrative. They can't rebuild power in a world where you define relevance. Then, execute symbolic reversal. This is Machiavelli's art refined. You take their strongest weapon and wield it better, with ease. If they were known for confidence, you become quietly self-assured. If they used humor to control others, you use precision and timing to win laughter without effort. If they ruled with arrogance, you command through composure. You don't imitate them. You perfect the traits they abused. Soon, the comparison becomes obvious to everyone. The crowd sees two versions of power, one loud and fragile, the other calm and unshakable. They'll decide for themselves which deserves respect. The ego you dismantled will sense it too. And that realization, that you became what they pretended to be, is what finishes them. After that comes the social erasure. You don't attack or exile them. You simply stop reacting. Treat them like everyone else. No special attention, no hostility, no emotional charge. The absence of focus is worse than rejection. It's invisibility. To an ego, being unseen is death. If they confront you, stay warm and calm. I think we just moved in different directions. It's nothing personal. Say it softly. Never argue. Never explain. The moment you defend yourself, you rejoin the game. But when you stay gentle and detached, they can't touch you. You've transcended the conflict entirely. Understand this. Silence is a mirror. The louder they scream for attention, the more their own insecurity echoes back at them. The less you react, the more they project. They'll replay conversations in their mind, searching for meaning in your calm. They'll imagine motives that don't exist, build theories about what you think of them. The silence does all the work. You don't need to lift a finger. Machiavelli knew that absence is a form of dominance. When someone can't read you, they fear you. When they can't affect you, they respect you. That's how you turn psychological warfare into art, by mastering detachment so completely that others crumble under their need for understanding. At this point, something shifts. You stop playing entirely. You realize that breaking egos was never about cruelty, it was about discipline. Every move you made required self-control, to flatter instead of fight, to pause instead of explode, to withdraw instead of win. The true victory was mastering yourself. Because that's the paradox. Once you understand how fragile most egos are, you stop needing to crush them. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You can look arrogance in the face and smile, knowing it's a mask. And when you reach that level of calm awareness, the same people who once tried to dominate you will start avoiding you. Your composure exposes them without a word. This is the highest form of Machiavellian power, transcendent control. You become untouchable not because you defeated others, but because you're beyond their games. People sense your self-possession and adjust their behavior automatically. They lower their tone, they measure their words. You don't demand respect, your stillness commands it. And when others ask about the person you once dismantled, shrug. Say, we just don't talk much anymore. Nothing more. The mystery strengthens your aura while they fade into speculation. The less you say, the more people imagine. And imagination is far more powerful than any explanation. By now, you've learned the essence of Machiavellian mastery. To influence without effort, to dominate without visible struggle, to wound without raising your hand. It's not about being cruel. It's about understanding human weakness so deeply that you never need to shout to make your point. The final truth is this. Breaking an ego isn't an act of aggression. It's an act of control. Control of your emotions, your reactions, your presence. You don't destroy others by force. You let their illusions collapse under the weight of your calm. So when arrogance crosses your path again, remember, don't confront. Observe. Don't argue. Redirect. Don't humiliate. Let silence do it for you. Don't announce victory. Embody it. Because real power isn't loud. It doesn't threaten. It doesn't explain. It simply is. And when everyone else is fighting to be heard, you'll stand quietly, untouchable, unreadable, unshaken. The room will feel it before you speak. And that feeling, that calm that makes the proud tremble, is the final proof that you've mastered the Machiavellian art of breaking egos without ever breaking your silence.